but that was about the only structure along Sunrise Drive other than the Catholic Calvary Cemetery on the west side of Sunrise Drive and a few blocks south of First Lutheran, and the Green Hill Cemetery a couple blocks north of First Lutheran on the east side. So the city engineer at the time was Martin Mink, and Martin told me that in 1965 he realized from driving out west of uh, Sunrise Drive that because the earth was still frozen and the water had melted, the snow had melted so rapidly, and there had been such a massive amount of snow during that winter that the standing water on the frozen fields would come roaring down the hill east of Sunrise Drive and flood a lot of houses below Sunrise Drive. So Martin requested volunteers to sandbag along Sunrise Drive. And I remember being up there and looking to the west, and as far as you could see, it was just like a giant lake up there. And the water kept rising faster than we could sandbag along Sunrise Drive, which was quite a stretch of roadway, quite a length of territory to sandbag. So it was decided that in order to deal with the massive quantity of water, that they would create an opening in the sandbag and the sandbag dike and do a controlled release across the cornfield on the east side of Sunrise Drive and follow an existing small ravine that went down to North 8th Street. And if you go back to the previous slide there, the little bit of the house that you can see in the extreme upper right of this image is the south side of the Earl Fitch house, that pink house that I mentioned earlier. And the water came gushing down. This is the aftermath that you're looking at in this image. When the water flow is at its height, you can see that it cut out all of that area. It just cut out a tremendous amount of earth on the south side of Fitch's house. Fitches were very lucky that they weren't flooded out. Okay, Ruth. Yeah, this is a shot of the ravine. It's kind of hard to tell what you're looking at, but it's the same ravine. And this is where the water from the ravine wound up. As the water flowed from Sunrise Drive, then down the ravine past the Fitch house, it landed on North 8th Street, which was immediately in front of the Fitch house. Sandbags diverted the water for half a block to head south to Madison Street. And sandbags again diverted the water to head east. And it was sandbagged all the way from Madison Street at the intersection with 8th, along Madison to the intersection with 7th, to the intersection with North Washington, to the intersection with North 5th Street. And when this picture was taken, the photographer was standing on Madison looking to the east, and there's apparently a woman standing on the left side of the picture, and above her Well, by her head, there's a street sign. That street sign says North Fifth Street. And you can see part of a building on the east side of North Fifth Street. That's one of the several barracks that had been used as temporary housing after World War II. And at the time this picture was taken, the other barracks had been removed, but this one was preserved as the warm-up shack for the local skating rink. And the buildings at the extreme left of this picture are along Scarrow Street. So I'll give you an idea where this is. At the time, in 1965, the Veterans Field on the east side of North Fifth Street was entirely open. It wasn't all fenced in and full of trees and other barriers the way it is today. It was completely open. It made a perfect place for that massive quantity of water coming from Sunrise Drive to spread out and disperse and get into the storm sewers that took it down to the Minnesota River. I can tell you afterward that you've never seen so much mud in all your life looking at Veterans Field afterward. It was just a tremendous mess. Okay, we can go on to the next one here. Now this was also taken from Madison Street, and you can see part of a street sign immediately to the left of the big pole that's sticking up in the photograph. And the street sign is at the intersection of Madison and North Washington. So you're looking from the east up a slight grade up Madison Street toward North 8th. So North 8th would have been 2 blocks farther west from where this picture was taken. You can see the water coming down. This is after most of the water had disappeared. There's still a significant quantity flowing, but believe me, this is nothing compared to what it was at its peak. Okay, Ruth.
Okay, this is the last slide here.
Okay. I was going to tell you too that previous picture, I remember walking down after the water had stopped flowing and looking down into the excavation that had been carved out by the flowing water on Madison. And I remember estimating that the pavement had been scoured away. I estimated to be about 10 feet down from where it normally would have been. So that water had a tremendous force to it. It really took a big chunk of earth out of Madison Street. Took them a long time to repair Madison Street and fill in everything. Okay. Does anybody have any questions or stories or comments?
Make sure you unmute if you do.
Ruth, did you get that file that I sent you in the chat?
In the chat, no.
Or I was hoping to share it. It's a non-flood photo, but it has to do with floods, and I think it's kind of interesting.
Okay, 1 second.
I can tell you a few stories in the meantime here. In 1951, my dad was on the city crew as a lineman for the light and water department. And he was gone for several days because of the severity of the flood here in St. Peter. And in 1965, he was the superintendent of the light and water department and worked closely with the city engineer, Martin Mink, the man that I mentioned earlier. They had been high school classmates. And I remember that my dad told me in 1965 that they were extremely worried about the structural integrity of the Broadway Bridge. We have some slides in the museum collection, some photographs in the museum collection that show the erosion along the east side of the Broadway Bridge on the south side of Broadway or Highway 99, whichever you want to call it. And I remember my dad telling me about the large number of dump trucks that brought in loads of riprap and dumped them into that eroded area. And they just disappeared under the water. They just kept dumping in load after load after load of riprap. And you can see this in some of the photos that are in part of the museum's collection. They did stabilize the bridge, but it was a close thing, put it that way. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because North Mankato was so badly flooded in 1951, the authorities had to concern themselves with the possibility of people breaking into flooded homes and making off with things. So there was obviously a pass system to show that you actually belonged to
You were a resident.
some part of North Mankato. Yeah, and this one here, obviously along Belgrade Avenue. I can tell you too, going back to 1965 again, my dad told us that he and his foreman took a boat into the old powerhouse building and checked on the integrity of the equipment and the materials that were in the building. And he said it was kind of strange because they stored the Christmas decorations there. So all these Christmas decorations were floating around beside the boat as they were inside the water, inside the building. Now this is another shot. This is the Century Club on the west side of the old Main Street Bridge in North Mankato, on the north side of Belgrade Avenue. You can see
the Hubbard Towers, the mill towers in the back.
I was just about to say, you can see the grain elevators from Hubbard Milling across the river there. This particular sign, there's a photo from an issue of National Geographic magazine that dealt with the 1965 flood in Minnesota. And a photo shows this sign in National Geographic. I've got a copy here at the house. If you're a National Geographic subscriber, you can go online and pull up that from their archives and look at it.
There's a really well framed colorized photo looking down the block. This sign is sitting there and you can see Century Club with the diners sign and then the comfy bar sign and everything there too, which is really cool, and it kind of gives it context. This sign the photo doesn't do it justice, just how crazy it was to see that block with this sign there.
I just read Tammy's comment, and I was interested in the fact that she worked for Bob Swedberg. You know, I knew Bob Swedberg up until the time of his death, and I just thought he was the greatest guy. And I remember when he agreed to let me borrow his slides, and I told him that I would digitize them and that I wanted to put them on the Minnesota Reflections website. And I had the opportunity to sit and show him his slides on the Minnesota Reflections website. And he was pretty thrilled at that. He was just a terrific guy. That's something I want to emphasize, that we've shown you a few images from the extensive collection that we have at the Nicolet County Historical Society. If you go online to the Minnesota Reflections website, you can select by contributor. And if you select Nicolet County Historical Society, which you'll find under the letter N, just type in flood, and you'll find all of Bob Swedberg's slides, and you'll find a large number of black and white images from 1965 as well. But you also find a tremendous number of 1951 images. You'll find additional ones from 1908. You'll find the 1897 and the 3 1881 slides or stereo views as well. And we always encourage people to share images and stories with us. We've borrowed no end of photographs of all kinds of different topics over the years. We've digitized them, and that way we've helped build our digital collection of Nicolet County images. We always encourage people to donate photos if they're willing to do so, but at minimum, we encourage people to let us digitize photos that they have, not only about floods, but anything that's relevant to Nicolet County history. We've got pictures of schools or churches or school classes or businesses, whatever you have. Talk to us, and we'll see what we can do. We also encourage people to put something on paper. If you've got stories, we want to hear those stories, and we'd like to add those to our files. So if you've got flood stories, if you've got blizzard stories, if you've got stories about schools or churches or businesses, let us know, put something on paper, and we'll add it to our files.
I think you need it. It'll have more drag to it.
Ruth, do you have anything to add as we're coming up here on the hour?
I just would like to thank everybody, thank Bob especially for his wonderful, interesting presentation, and thank everyone for joining us this morning. Thank you also to Jessica. So we will see you next time. And Jessica, your final parting word.
Yeah, and unless there's any other additional questions or comments,
I've got one comment for you, Bob. This is Tuff Miller, St. Peter.
yeah, good to see you, Tuff.
I was drafted on the 8th of April, 1965 into the Army, and my father lived on the bluffs west of St. Peter. And a couple of days prior to that, you were talking about how much water was out there. I took a Alice Chalmers tractor and drove down near the Ray Keeneland farm. And the water over the township road was deep enough to go up to the center axle on the front tire then. I remember coming to town the night before I got drafted, driving down through the water, crossing Washington Avenue, going down, looking at the bridge, helping sandbag in town. I remember the few days prior to that, the ice flows on the Minnesota River were so big they would hit the bridge, which had already closed to traffic, and it would just shudder from the big chunks of ice. And then the day I got drafted, we got sworn in, and the train tracks from Minneapolis to Fort Leonard Wood somewhere were washed out. So we had to take a Greyhound bus to Fort Leonard Wood. That's some of the memories I have, Bob.
Yeah. Tough, you'll need to go to Minnesota Reflections and take a look at the color photos from 1965, and you'll see the ice at the Broadway Bridge. And you and I both remember that very well. That was another big problem that threatened the structural integrity of the bridge. But I remember my dad telling me they were especially worried about the supports on the east side eroding away. And you'll see in the black and white images on Minnesota Reflection, the erosion that was so significant on the east side of the bridge. You can see why. There you go.
I just shared these on Facebook before we did this program. I shared this on the 8th. It's part of a series that shows, so this is the east side of the bridge, the Kasota side. You can see it there. So there's the erosion that was happening, and you can see the crew truck there. And then they were dumping riprap, and they had sandbags and everything going in there. So there's a series of these, but eventually you go from that to this to try to keep that bridge in place.
Yeah, and these are on Minnesota Reflections, so you'll enjoy looking at these. It's a remarkable collection of images that we have on the website.
Thanks, Bob. It was a great presentation.
Yeah, well, like I say, good to see you. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yep.
And write that story down.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll do that.
Please.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up here. We'll end on that extremely exciting note, unless anyone has anything else to share. We'll be back in May with some military history. May is National Military Appreciation Month, so that's why we've scheduled that one. We'll be sharing all kinds of interesting history there, and be sure to stop back again and share yours as well. If you've got something to share ahead of time, you maybe can't make it, feel free to reach out to myself or Bob or Ruth. We're pretty easy to find these days at home. But our emails, phone numbers, all of that, it's on the website. You can get a hold of us through Facebook, any of that. And then in June, we'll be talking how to do genealogy at NCHS. So we've got a couple of interesting topics coming up. Please be sure to check our social media pages and our website for all kinds of interesting content. Minnesota Reflections for sure. And we'll thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
I saw a little comment from Cindy Wilson. I'll give a plug for Cindy Wilson's outstanding book on the winter of 1880 to 1881. I finished it. I was absolutely thrilled, tremendously impressed. It's a great book, and I'm glad Cindy was part of our program today. I'm glad to see that she enjoyed it.
The beautiful snow, right, Cindy?
That's correct. Thank you, Bob. That was very sweet.
It's the least I could do. It's an outstanding book.
Thank you.
We'll eventually be carrying it at the History Center's gift shop when we reopen sometime soon.
Great. If I could ask one question, this is Ken Safford. I knew Barton Manx so well. and I know he had a bunch of stories. Did he turn his things over to the Historical Society about the flood and some of the other things he did?
I don't recall that he donated anything specifically pertaining to the flood. I knew Martin quite well because he was such a good friend and classmate of my father, and actually lived only a block west of where I'm living today. And I remember some serious conversations with Martin over the years, and him telling me the details of what he went through during the 65 flood in particular, as well as stories about his military service as a person on board submarines in World War II in the Pacific. So he was quite a fascinating guy to talk to. One of the nicest people I've ever known.
Well, I would say that the family must have some remnants of his discussions that would be of value to put in the Historical Society. But I don't know the kids. I just knew Martin and Carol.
Yeah, I know the kids. I know all three of them. One is on the East Coast, another's on the West Coast, and Maggie is up in one of the metro area communities. And I've seen, let's see, Robert and Maggie within the last couple of years. But it didn't occur to me to ask them whether Martin had saved material about the 65 flood, or whether they could illuminate me from their own personal recollections about what Martin had said about anything that Martin dealt with. That'd be a good point. If I happen to see Maggie or Robert again, I'll be sure to bring that up.
Okay, well, I might see somebody at the company here in Mankato, and I might ask them if they've got any archives. But I know that he was really proud of what he did. So thanks for the story, Bob. Really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
thanks for letting me in a little late, because I was messing around with Facebook and then finally just went to Zoom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Glad you made it, Ken.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, hearing none, we'll end this, and we'll stop recording, and we'll get this uploaded so we can share it with everyone. And like I said before, thanks for coming, and we'll see you back in May for military history. Bye, everybody.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.